everyone, and welcome to the board meeting tonight at John W. Bate Middle School, March the 14th, 2022, and it's Pie Day. So I was in Kroger, and they had pies for sale for $3.14. So I didn't buy one, but it was a madhouse when we were there. So, but anyways, welcome. We need to approve the meeting agenda. Need a motion, please.
We approve the meeting agenda as presented for this date.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. All right, now we're going to go down to presentations and board member comments.
I wanted to real quickly give a shout out to some students who just competed in the state speech tournament. Lila Ungz was in the top 24 for pros, which is awesome. And then Damani Bell and Grace Haynes were second in the state for improv. So that's very exciting to see our speech legacy continued on. We also had two students in the high school, Love Mays and Desiree Tandy, who were 12th Region All-Tournament team. They made the 12th Region All-Tournament team. So congratulations to our students who are out there achieving and giving us making our schools look good, which they really do.
Definitely. I also want to take note and also commend Olivia Moore on doing such a great job for our schools and getting us into the newspaper and always on a positive note. But in that, we're celebrating this month, Arts Month, in the Danville schools. Gravely Hall is one of the most unique buildings, or our high school actually is one of the most unique buildings. It's been there since '64, and it looks like $1 million. But to have a fully functional arts center that was built in that era, basically to take up that much square footage in a building, was about unheard of in that time. So it's quite an honor for me that when we came to the Danville schools, my wife graduated from here, she basically said where we were going to live, and that was in the Danville City schools, and that's been the best thing. But it's been quite an honor for me to be part of the system. And knowing that our arts program is second to none, and the fact that when you find out that we serve 28,000 people in a year at Gravely Hall, students, parents, civic events, it's pretty phenomenal. And that the fact that we are doing some work on it now, which it always needs, but it's a great thing. And you know, one thing I have figured out, all these college kids now can get money for being in college, but having products endorsed. Well, think about our high school kids that make our system what it is. They work so hard, whether it's athletics or arts or being a student or whatever it might be, and the only compensation they get is that they get to come to school every day. But yet 90% of our kids truly enjoy that. So it's a great pleasure. And kudos to the basketball girls and boys. Seasons. So, anyways, okay. Glenn?
How many people made snowmans over the week?
That's true.
How wonder. No comments. All's well.
Superintendent.
Well, for my superintendent comment, I'd just like to congratulate so many of our teachers, students, and parents for the wonderful job that's been done during our ACT this past week. And we all know that ACT is such an important event for our students, and I've been told it went tremendously well this week, thanks in part to our teachers, our staff, and our technology folks, and so many others that helped ACT go well. I know our families will anticipate the results of the ACT, and we will as well. And lastly, considering we're at Bate Middle School this evening, I'd like to let everyone know that we have posted the Bate principal's position for the 22-23 school year, and we have Miss Angie Barnes here, and she's done a wonderful job as interim, and we appreciate her so much. And she and the leadership at Bate, along with the staff, continue to do. We're not letting her out after tonight. She's going to keep on working through the rest of this year. but we're so thankful for her leadership and also helping prepare Bate for their next leader. Thank you, and that is my report.
Okay. So let's move on to student and staff recognitions, and Ms. Barnes, the floor is yours.
Dangerous, let me have a microphone. Again, I'm E.G. Barnes. Thank you for having me here tonight and being at Bate Middle School. I have a couple people I would like to recognize tonight. First is Ella Bottom. You want to come on up? Ella was selected as a legislative page for an essay she wrote in support of Family Resource Youth Service Centers. And as a result, she was able to sit next to Senator Rick Girdler at the state capitol on February 22nd when they were discussing our Family Resource Youth Centers at the state this last month. So we're proud of you for representing
Hang on one second.
board member, yes. Remember this time.
Well, sometimes we don't.
Good job, Ella. We're really proud of you. A couple of other shout-outs tonight. We have a certificate of excellence granted to a staff member, Jennifer Shear. Do you want to come on up? Jennifer has provided an outstanding service as Bate Middle School's instructional coach this year. In her first year in this role, she's provided resources, built capacity, structured a collection of data for the RTI program, created a user-friendly Bulldog portal for teachers, and many other things too countless to list to support student and teacher learning here at our school. We couldn't do it without her. Jennifer, we're also very proud of Miss Luster. You want to come on up? Miss Luster is an invaluable resource for our school and our district, I believe, in providing service to students here at our school in her role as a Spanish and an ESL teacher. She is always encouraging, she's engaging, and she provides, like I said, just a multitude of supports that we could be here all night if I listed all of those, but she is just an outstanding resource for our students and our families.
All right. Next on the agenda is the personnel notification. Hopefully everybody on the board's had a chance to take a look at that. So if you have any comments or questions, give Dr. Thomas a call. And then next up we have Mr. John Carmen, our architect for a couple of projects, and he's going to give us an update.
Good evening, Chair, Superintendent, Board members. It's always good to be back home. A couple of projects to give you an update on. First of all, the softball field concession restroom building. We've been working with a vendor to design and program a new concession restroom building. The route that we are taking is a pre-manufactured building. There's a couple of advantages to that. Potentially some cost savings on that, but you're locked into the cost from the very beginning, so you know what it is going into it. Perhaps the biggest advantage of going this route, and I know that all of you have heard the nightmares about supply chain, is that it also locks you into a better schedule. There are some site preparations that have to be done for a pre-manufactured building, but we've provided some estimates that the BG1 is, I think this is actually an amended BG1, and so these estimates that we've provided will update that BG1, and that will be submitted to Kentucky Department of Education, I assume, in the next few days. So we've been working with the board staff, with Kim, thank you very much, and I think that should be ready to go. If there's any questions about that, I'll be glad to try and answer those questions.
John, the question I have is in regards to some of the site work, for example, connections and so forth. Are we locking into you all using your reach to get people to do that work, or is that, if that's work that we can do locally with our own district staff, do they have the ability and as such then be able to lower the cost some?
We can certainly talk about that, I think, and we've had these conversations before. KDE certainly has some parameters that you have to follow in terms of contracting. The extent of the site work is our connection to the utilities, which would be water. Water has been extended partially to the softball field. We have to extend it over to where the concession building will be located. Electric will be extended from, there's a panel behind the press box area. We'll extend that over. And then sanitary sewer, it actually, we have to extend it kind of down over the embankment down towards the tennis court to make the connection. So those are the services that have to be extended over to the concession building. And then the concrete slab has to be poured also. So
I was mainly thinking along the lines, we've got very qualified staff in electrical hookups and so forth.
Right.
So that was mainly my thought, because some of that other stuff we're probably going to have to hire outside of the
yeah, I think so. The electrical hookup is really pretty simple. Of course, it'll be brought into the building, and it's simply just connecting. The cable will be run from the connection at the press box over to the new building, and then it's connected into a sub-panel that's located in the concession building. Possibly there may be a few dollars savings if you have somebody that can do that. We can certainly talk through that as we move forward. We anticipate, we've already had some conversations with KDE. Under their relatively new system, you don't know exactly what the submittal and approval process is until this amended BG1 is uploaded. They kind of give you a class or a tier, and that tells you how much review and approval you have to go through. Hopefully it's low enough of a tier that basically we can go ahead and get bids on it, and we just get approval after the bids are obtained.
There's still some legislation out there that may even simplify that process even more.
You're correct about that, but the question is, I think once we find out what level this is, then we can see where we stand on it. I don't know that if it benefits us to wait until July, I think would be after the turn of the year, fiscal year. So hopefully we may be in concrete by then. I don't know, but we can assess that.
Yeah. Well, seeing as you say that, how long do you anticipate the amount of time it will take to complete the project? Because we know we won't be starting out there until, perhaps mid-June at the earliest after softball season, I'm guessing.
That's probably a good estimate. In my conversations with the vendor that we think that we'll be able to obtain through the cooperative, they're out about 2 months in fabricating. And of course, if they can stay to that schedule, it really is as simple as they put it on a flatbed truck, they ship it. If it's the same vendor, they ship it from Oldham County, pick it up and set it on a slab. It's really that simple. I mean, there's some setup and connections and things after that, but it's a pretty simplified process. We should be ready to, we can go ahead, and I was telling Kim this, we can go ahead in the next coming week or so, go ahead and get the purchase order with the cooperative. I think we can get that in place so that that 2-month clock can start ticking with the fabricator.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I've got a question. Even though you're going in with a prefab structure, in the event there's a desire to expand that facility, would it create a heartache, a heartburn to do that?
It could
For
be
future
done.
growth.
I think it would be similar to a portable classroom or a manufacturer housing where it would just be, you attach onto the side of it. And you expand probably in the length direction more so than the width, just because of the rate slope. I mean, that's a good point that we, quite frankly, have not considered, but I can ask that question. It could be that on the end that we want to expand, that they may have to say, shore up that end wall so that if in the future.
Additional footer in case
Possibly,
of
yes,
expansion. Right.
That's a good point, John. I hope that there's enough excitement in the softball field with softball that we need to expand.
Right.
And that just reminded me that these restroom buildings also are located such that they will be able to serve the tennis court also.
Okay.
So it's not too bad a walk uphill.
Okay. Well,
So-
with that in mind, possibility of expansion needs to be in the picture.
Yes, sir. That's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah.
John, can I ask you, how long ago did you do the original drawings for the softball field?
Well, we did, and I think you're talking about the master plan for the athletics. I stand to be corrected, but I think maybe it was 1998. I think.
Almost there.
And I'm just, and I'm just bringing this up because this is how long that
Yeah.
this has been on the books and wanting to get this together and finally we're almost complete.
But there's been a number of facilities that or improvements that have happened since that time, whether it's an upgrade to the football field, there were drainage problems in the soccer field, and improvements to the tennis courts. So we like to be able to reflect back and say that our master plan actually maybe did some good.
Well, I think it did. I just wanted to bring that
Well,
up.
thank you.
And also the fact John is an alum, class of 72, and always welcome. Thank you so much for working with us. Very appreciate it. Does anybody else have any?
Just update on Anchor Plaza.
Okay, I didn't know if you all wanted to take action on the BG or not.
We've got that a little later in the
Okay.
agenda.
And we will.
Okay, so Anchor Plaza, we are probably about 10 days out, if not a little bit sooner, from having those construction documents completed. I think it's going to turn out nice. I like the design that you all chose, the circular design. We're trying to, and I'll be glad to come back or certainly consume the plans, come back and present. We're trying to insert a few elements. We're showing what we're calling the marine mooring bollards, similar to what's in front of the high school, which we selected back in, I think that was a 2002. No, that was a 1990s project also, when we improved that entrance and put in those bollards. So we're going to kind of pull that same, what we call design vocabulary into it. We're on two ends or two sides of the circle, we're putting some panels where perhaps you can attach maybe a story about the ship that this anchor came from. But maybe there's something else. We've got 2 panels. We can talk about what the other one, what the story is for the other one. Maybe it's about some of the donors or something. It'll be a nice little, it's going to be set back from the road or the sidewalk about 40-something feet. The one small tree, I think it's a dogwood. It's an okay tree, but I think there's been a decision, hopefully there's no real major tree huggers, but to remove that tree so that you get visibility coming in from Lexington, that way, because that tree just really blocks the view of that.
We are replacing, our discussion was that we are going to replace that tree and with one similar in a different location.
And so it doesn't block the visibility.
That's correct.
I'm not sure what the status, has the anchor been?
It's been sandblasted and I think it's been primed for paint, but we're not going to paint it until it's set so that it doesn't scratch up.
Okay. So I'll be glad to come back. Certainly next week I can send the documents to you all, and you can circulate them around. I'll be glad to come back. And then we will need to have a discussion about the contracting of that, about what the in-kind work or donated work, or how we get bids on that. It's not a real complicated construction. So, I appreciate the time to bring this forward.
Thank you so much.
Look forward to continuing work.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's move on to the item 4, which is approval of the previous minutes. Can we have
Baseball, soccer.
baseball, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Dunn, I didn't mean to
no worries.
leave you out.
Just a few pictures to update where we are on this project. They completed the decking all the way around. We installed security lights that is on the back side of the press box. And the wires to disable it when we're using it during the games, and then it'll be active during the night when it's not occupied. So we've got on the inside, on the out, yeah, there's a picture of the deck. It wraps around the front and part of the side of the building. Inside, we made bigger windows for viewing, and so it's a better viewing area in the front for baseball and also on the side for soccer. I know if you went to a soccer game, the ball was down in the far corner of the field, the person that was keeping the clock kind of had to basically lean out the window. And with the new changes, that person even has the option to stand outside and on the deck and be able to have a full view of the field. Upstairs where we took out the stairwell, I think I have a picture inside of the press box. Maybe, I don't know. Well, it's open, they were still painting now that it's all done. It's opened up quite a bit. We bought shelves for the trophies that were upstairs, so I think we installed those today. So along with, there's the ceiling fan lights to help ventilation if they're able to stuff each time. They've also got the air conditioning units in the wall. Also we have found some countertops that was from another, I think we may have taken out of another building or left over that will work, that we're able to use those to put upstairs for the counter area and downstairs in the concession stand part that will look a lot better than what we had in there currently. I think it was just stuck in there. building. And now they're mounted to the deck on either side, so better sound line is there. You can see it kind of on the left side of there. And standing from the front of standing on the pitcher's mound, the press box and deck, it seems a lot more centered than it did before. I think when we redid the home plate and the backstop a couple of years ago, it kind of shifted to where it was centered, so it looked odd to you if you really paid attention. That really helps it make it more centered for just the human aspect and ratio.
So there's one speaker aimed at the soccer field, one aimed at the baseball field?
No, those are just on the press box for, and the soccer field's got separate speakers. So there's a separate speaker for the soccer field.
That's great, Ernest. I'm thinking about liability issues with the deck out front, so is there limited access to that? I mean, baseball season starts today.
Yeah.
Yes. We got things that Barry's put up that says authorized personnel only
Okay.
to go up, top of the stairs. Also underneath, I think, that's gonna be kind of sectioned off underneath the press box where they can use some of the game personnel, they can use the radar button there, with no seats.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
like a VIP section. Instead of seats.
Expensive tickets.
Yeah.
So how much are those things?
To be determined.
To be determined.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Taking this silent bids on that one.
Have we had a rain since we've pretty much completed the project?
Yeah, we got a couple of rains.
And
Snow too.
Dry,
Yeah,
yes.
dry.
we are dry, good.
Yeah, and we also were able to install a couple more electrical outlets for us that they can use on the outside. Our maintenance guys took care of all the wiring, mounting lights, and everything else like that. We used ProLight Sound, they had to do the rewiring of the sound system. We got a couple of upgrades on the sound system when we got that too. It's going to look good. I think everybody will be pleased with it when it's all said and done.
But it's ready to go.
Most.
Yeah.
We can function.
Okay.
There's a part we had to order for the baseball, for the scoreboard. I don't know if it's coming in yet. The scoreboard, something on the scoreboard, first team, the visitors, on the visitor side, wasn't working properly, but we ordered it and should have shipped this week and want to be here for Thursday.
That's correct. Well, thank you for that report. I have to commend our folks for stepping in and doing all that they've done. You for making sure it happened.
We've got our maintenance staff's top notch. If they can't figure it out, they're going to call people to do it. If we want to do it and we think we can make it happen, those guys are bend over backwards to try to make it work.
Ernest gets a lot of credit too because we appreciate all of the contractors who did some of that work, but they were on other schedules and he somehow managed to convince them to come do our work. So good job on that.
Thank you very much for your report. Okay, now I think we can go to item 4, which is approval of the February 14th meeting minutes. Need a motion, please.
Make a motion that we approve the minutes from 2/14/22.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second, and all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all. All right, we've had a lot of folks wonder how we do the superintendent evaluation. And since we're going to be hiring a superintendent, it of course would be talked about with the superintendent prior to a contract being signed on how the board would do the evaluation. The instrument that we use actually was developed through the Kentucky School Board Association along with KDE. It's been around several years. I think it's about what, Dr. Thomas, about 27 pages? Something crazy like that. So there's a lot in there to cover. I think in some ways it's too much, and I think in some ways it's not precise enough on some things. So but I've asked Dr. Thomas, since he's been a recipient of this evaluation tool, to kind of go over it with us. I guess, Glenn, you've been through this 2 or 3 times?
Yes.
And Jennifer, you have not.
Yep.
And Esther's out of town and Wade couldn't be at the meeting. I've been through this many times, but it's always good to have a discussion. So, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Board. And so what you have, KSBA at their training and then also on their website, they provide a document that says Kentucky School Board Association Superintendent Evaluation. And I've skipped past the first 2 pages. I really want to focus for just a moment on the first 2 pages. The reason being, the first 2 pages, those are our actual policy and procedure. There's an example in KSBA that is not our policy nor our procedure. So I really want to call your attention to the very first document there that says Administration Evaluation. At the top, it is the Danville Independent School District Policy 02.14. And there's a couple of things that I really want to point out because we abide by our policy. And our policy is different than the model policy that they have for KSBA. The first thing that I'll point out to the board for your consideration is the third word of this that says the board and superintendent shall develop procedures and forms for the evaluation of the superintendent. And you have to be in compliance with all applicable statutes and regulations. And that's what this policy is setting out. So whenever you get ready to develop the policy that you want to use and the procedure that you want to use with the superintendent, it's going to be with that superintendent in mind, which means if we have a superintendent in place on July 1, there's a couple of things that you really need to do in July. One of these would be to talk about how we're going to move forward. And listen, it'll be an overwhelming time for this superintendent and for the board as well. So you'll want to make certain that that is on your July agenda. I want to talk just briefly about your policy that says the frequency of evaluation. And if you'll notice, by our policy, they're evaluated annually in writing. So you're going to guarantee, because we all follow policy, this is our policy, you're going to guarantee that we are going to evaluate our superintendent at least once a year. Well, this one actually says once a year, and that will be a document that is in writing. The superintendent will have it, the board will have it, and the community, anybody who's interested in it, will have access to that after it is finalized. Toward the end of that frequency of evaluation, I want you to notice that the process to be used shall be explained and discussed with the superintendent. Now check this out. No later than the end of the first month of reporting for employment each year. That's actually statute, or maybe KAR, I mean, we'll defer, but the point being is, whenever I evaluate Ms. Satterley, she reports on July 1. During those first 30 days, as her direct supervisor, I have to go over the process of which she'll be evaluated. Likewise, because you all oversee the superintendent, you'll need to go over the process and the document with the superintendent no later than the end of the first month. That's July of 2022, that you'll need to go over that with that superintendent. It's going to be a lot for you all to do. It's going to be a lot for this superintendent to digest because there's so much other things that are going on. I want to point out the process aspect. And if you're going to discuss the evaluation of the superintendent with the superintendent, this is prior to the summit, the ultimate evaluation that's in writing. You notice that that's going to be conducted in closed session. So at some point, and I would suggest February or March, you're going to have a closed session for the purpose of discussing the superintendent evaluation. When you go into that closed session, it's for the purpose of discussing anything related to that superintendent's evaluation. And I'll go through a few of those things that you are going to discuss here in just a few moments. Ultimately, you're going to come out, and that first meeting that you have will be it's informal, so to speak. It's a discussion, and you all are going to, in essence, talk about all the things that ultimately will be on the summative evaluation. And you'll notice the last paragraph there, the summative evaluation, that one, after you've had all of this preliminary discussion in closed session, then maybe not even that month. In fact, I wouldn't recommend that you do it that month because you're going to write all of this up. And I would write it through both the check boxes that they have, and perhaps you're going to do a little prose there and write that out and say, you know, hey, the superintendent has blah, 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 blah. But you will actually read that document in an open session of the board. Again, I would suggest that if you do your informal meeting in February or March, then you're going to have the open session in March or April in which you're going to, and that doesn't necessarily go along with the timeline KSBA recommends, but you need to put a nice little bow on that and wrap up for the year. That is the Danville Independent School District policy, and we're going to follow the policy. The second page is the procedure that you're using. This is Danville Independent Schools Procedure 02.14 AP.2. And it's a real simple procedure that just says the board may utilize locally developed superintendent evaluation procedures. So if you don't like the document that KSBA recommends, and really it is the document that's pretty much used across the Commonwealth, but if there are specific things that you want in your own document, this board can do that based on our procedure. It's not policy. It's not policy, but you can make that procedure and make those changes as needed. Let me just pause there and see if there's any questions about our policy or procedure.
So, I have a question. If we decide to utilize a different evaluation or modify the evaluation, do we need to submit that to KDE?
I think KDE approves all superintendent evaluations, and so I always think it's a good thing that if you're changing this document, I would change it in an open session, and I would send it to the state. I think that's good practice right there. But I think the procedure allows you to make any changes that you would like. I'm not 100% certain about the KDE having to approve our evaluation process, but I do think that's good practice. Any other questions, policy or procedure? So now we get into KSBA's document, and I really like page 3. And this is one of the few things that I want to discuss a little bit, because most of it is just, some of it is really just common sense and direction for your superintendent. But in the first paragraph on page 3, it talks about the superintendent's evaluation process, saying that a high quality superintendent process, it develops good board superintendent relationship. We know what we're talking about. You know what your expectations are. Superintendent knows what the expectations are. I love the clarity of roles, where this is the superintendent's role, this is the board's role. And creates a common understanding of the leadership, and it becomes that mechanism for public accountability. And then the second paragraph, I want to really highlight where it says performance evaluations are most effective when they are designed and used, check this out, for communicating future expectations, not simply for reviewing past performance. Now, you all heard the difference between what you're looking forward to and doing an autopsy, right? When you evaluate your superintendent on a past performance, that can be an accountability piece, and it can be a growth piece, but it's really an autopsy where you look back and said, That happened, but now we want to look forward and talk about what we're going to do. And so that's really the only thing that I want to point out on page 3. Pages 4 and 5 are their sample, both their sample policy and their sample procedure. Those are not ours. So on mine, I've got an X on that, on those 2 pages. Those are not our policy nor our procedure. And then we start getting into the performance rating. Again, this is a common performance rating. It becomes the standard in which your superintendent has discussions with KSBA, with their organization, if they're a part of KASA, certainly if they're a part of KASS, the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents. Those performance rating levels are, those are common knowledge amongst superintendents, and they're common threshold points for superintendents as well. With the majority being, you rarely see improvement required, especially unless someone's just not getting the job done. You're really talking about developing, accomplished, and exemplary. When you all come together during that process and you're meeting with the superintendent, you'll start hovering around one of those performance levels. And so let's say your new superintendent just knocks a home run on strategic planning. That superintendent leads an effort, brings the community together and says, this is what we're doing this year, this is what we're doing here in 6 months, this is where we're going to be a year from now, and brings everybody along in that process. That'd be a pretty strong strategic leadership, and provided there's evidence of those things, there shouldn't be any qualms about giving a first-year superintendent exemplary ratings. I think most, and it's not to push anybody down or to elevate anybody, most first-year superintendents land in that accomplished area, and they could be developing in areas. And I'll give you an example. The last standard is the, I can't remember the standard title, but basically it's how you work with advocating on behalf of your district and your students, and it's in there. So somebody can tell me when you get to that standard which one it is. It's that political one where you're having that impact. This may be a new superintendent's first time being a superintendent, and perhaps they don't know how to build legislation and advocate on behalf of independent districts. And that might be growth, so that might be a developing area. And you may have a superintendent that knocks a home run in instructional leadership. Again, that might be, I say knock a home run, but really changes the tenor of what we're doing to a positive, so we're going to get that trend data going up across the board academically, and then meeting that standard, which would be accomplished. And so those are those performance level ratings of a 4 with exemplary, a 3 with accomplished, a 2 with developing, and 1 with improvement required. I would suggest to the board that you don't necessarily do a number system where you might think it's a 1, he might think it's a 4, and then you land somewhere around 2.5. I would suggest staying away from that and getting more of a holistic approach to where this superintendent is on each standard. And then I'm just going to briefly go through each one of the standards, and then I'll certainly, any questions about the performance ratings? Then standard 1 is that strategic leadership. I'll call your attention to substandard 1.1. I'm not going to talk about a lot of these, but basically you're looking at substandard 1.1 with direction from the board. I would encourage you to say the superintendent facilitates a community process. That seems pretty important to us in an independent district. A community process to develop and implement a shared vision that focuses on improving student achievement. And I will tell this board, you're going to have the superintendent, you're going to evaluate it on all standards. But I would encourage you to have the superintendent focus on 1 or 2 of the standards. And then the first year of this superintendent, I think strategic leadership should be your focus leading it. I think it should be 1 of the perhaps 2 that you focus on. Again, It's a big job being superintendent. These are a lot of standards, a lot of substandards. And so when you do your process, you're going to say something like this in July. We met with the superintendent, we discussed the process of evaluation, and we've asked the superintendent to focus on standard 1, strategic leadership, and standard fill in the blank, whichever one this board chooses. And then you're going to really emphasize those couple of standards throughout this first year. Now, it's a tough job being the superintendent. I'm gonna jump back here and editorialize a little bit. At this point, I do want to say that in some ways, the superintendent's job is an impossible job because of the onus that so many people put on that superintendent. I joked with Kim earlier today that when talking about this discussion, that we're at a point where we want somebody to show up, be our superintendent, and put on a Superman or a Superwoman cape. And you know, Superman and Superwoman, that's fiction. We all get that because that person is not out there. And so that's so important that in the process of growing and really and bringing our community together around this role, it's going to be really important that you all have great clarity around those expectations for that superintendent. And I'll give you a great example of this. If you say that we want strategic leadership, and this is a person who's trying to build this shared vision, and somebody emails you and says, you know, that superintendent didn't even show up to the 5th grade spelling bee. All right. And you get all, because the board members, we love you. Thank you. You serve for practically nothing. I don't know why y'all take this butt with them every year. I don't know why you do, but you do, and we really, really appreciate it. But you can't react to every email that's sent to you in a negative way because there is no Superman, there is no Superwoman. And you had a discussion in July that said, we're going to focus on these 2 standards, and not attending the 5th grade spelling bee was not necessarily, it could be, but it's not necessarily the focus of what we're asking our superintendent to do. And likewise, there's a human resources standard in here. And I know board members get emails all the time about that teacher said this, or how can I get my nephew interviewed down there? Well, again, if human resources standard is not one you focused on, you have an individual discussion with the superintendent. Say, hey, I got this email, I'm turning it over to you. But you're not going to necessarily use that as the holding the sign up saying, should have done this, because you didn't ask that superintendent to really focus on that. All right, so I'm finished editorializing, but I think the board has to come together on what that looks like. I would certainly in year 1 encourage strategic leadership, and I think it's a fair thing because our new superintendent will go through a lot of training this first year that is required by superintendent, by the state, and there will be a lot of guidance in regards to strategic leadership. Standard 2 is the instructional leadership, and the only substandard I would call your attention to on that one, even though they're all good, is substandard 2.8, which ensures the school and district progress in the areas of proficiency, growth, graduation rate, closing achievement gaps, transition readiness, opportunity, and access. That should not be a surprise to any of you. In fact, when we did our assessment and accountability report back in November, I believe it was, guess what it focused on? Every one of those aspects. We've got a great opportunity to change achievement for Danville Independent Schools. I would encourage you in a couple of ways. With the high school kind of being the flagship school, because we're really proud of our graduates. I think we've got a great opportunity with dual credit through the University of Kentucky Next Gen and Bluegrass as well. We've got a great opportunity. We've got a great opportunity to build AP classes and ACT classes And when you do that, it really does become that thing where we can really just kind of hang our hat on the Danville High School graduate, being ready for that next grade after grade 12, whatever that is, whether that's college, whether that's workforce, or transitioning into that. But the other side of that is the achievement gaps that we have, and they manifest themselves across our district. And once a child, a student, and this is, again, we're not doing an autopsy here, okay? We realize we have freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors who are in this achievement gap. And every grade they move up, that window for us to narrow that achievement gap closes. So my encouragement for you on 2.8 is to really focus on the high school, on being a flagship school of this is a Danville graduate. But then I would also ask that we start at the very early elementary grades, focusing on things like diversity, things like individual needs of students and how they're met, and stay on that. And here's why. Our sophomores, juniors, seniors, freshmen, their achievement gap didn't happen overnight. They didn't just wake up and have an achievement gap. That happened over time. We're not going to close that achievement gap in the first year of your superintendent of Danville schools. It doesn't happen overnight either. And so a great plan on instruction would be to really focus on those gaps of our second language learners, our African American students, and our special needs students in particular. You all saw that data, and it was really, in some cases, 0 students in certain grades performing. You're not going to fix that next year in the 9th, 10th, or 11th grade. With a clear plan from elementary moving forward, then we can narrow that. But to expect that to happen in a day, a week, a month, or a year, that's probably not going to happen. I'll call your attention to Standard 3, which is cultural leadership. And I'm not going to call a substandard. I'm just going to point out the very first bold statement. The superintendent understands, now think about Danville Independent District whenever I read this. The superintendent understands the history, tradition, and multicultural differences of the district. That's a period there, but I'd almost put an exclamation point at the end of that sentence. That's going to be pretty important cultural leadership-wise. Standard 4 is that's the one I mentioned with the human resource leadership. And there's not really a substandard that hits this. So I think I'm just going to, again, editorialize what I think a good substandard for Danville schools would be under human resource leadership. It would look like this. Recruit and retain the best. It's that simple. Go after the teachers you want. Recruit them. If they're teaching calculus in Mercer County, and they're doing a bang-up job, and they're living in Casey and driving past us to go to Mercer, recruit them. Recruit them. We've got a great district, and it's an opportunity for smaller class size, and recruit the best, and then keep the best. And you all have heard, I've heard, let's not say you all heard, I keep hearing that we keep losing all of these teachers and staff members. And I would just simply say maybe some of them needed to go if they were not the best. But now, if we're losing them because another district is recruiting them because they are the best, we've got to retain them. We've got to put plans in place that keep the best teachers in our district. The individual that has the most impact on student learning is the teacher in the classroom. It's not the superintendent. It's not the Board of Education. And I would put that as a key. It's not substandard on there, but I think that's got to be a focus of what we do moving forward. Standard 5 is the managerial leadership. And again, I'm not going to call any particular substandard. I'm just going to say that you're going to have a superintendent that's going to have to oversee the district. And I liken it this way because I think I'm really a strong instructional leader, and I've got really strong financial skills, and I understand those things, but maybe I'm not the best person to talk to about what the HVAC is doing. But I've got to be able to talk to the board about what we're doing with HVAC, what we're doing with mowing, what we're doing with window tinting, whatever. And so you're going to have a superintendent that oversees the district. And that's the managerial leadership that, that you're going to discuss. And you may hire a superintendent that's fantastic on managerial leadership, and then you understand that perhaps then managerial leadership is really, really strong, financial is not. And so you're going to have to lean heavily on your knowledge and then the finance officer's knowledge as well. Standard 6 then is, that's the one dealing with collaborative leadership. And this is one that I would encourage you again in the bold print. I'm not going to pull an indicator out, but I'm going to talk about the bold print because really important for the board moving forward is the superintendent maintains a positive relationship with board members, and then check this out, as they work together. It's not the superintendent alone, it's not the board alone. You work together, and that is how you get community support. You know how I know that? It says so right there. When you have a board and superintendent that work together to establish community supports. Because when we're all working together, we're all working together because you represent the community, the constituents, and the superintendent is the one who is going to carry out the work of the board and of the district. And so you must have to work together. And so that only happens through effective communication. And also understanding your role as well in saying, hey, I'm not solving this issue. I'm passing this issue on to you. You're running the district, superintendent. I just want you to know this issue has come. And then, hey, we can work collaboratively to get that accomplished. Some good substandards in there as well, but I don't want to take up too much time. Influential leadership, you all didn't tell me. That's the one I was trying to come up with earlier. And this is the standard that deals with basically advocating, and it doesn't matter if that's with meeting with Center College president, meeting with the mayor, meeting with the Ephraim CEO, meeting with state legislators. This is really doing that and using this position as superintendent with all of those officials to really advocate for public education in general, but specific, I would say public education in general, then I would go even more specific and say independent district advocacy, because that is we're a very narrowing group. And then even more specific to that is advocating on behalf of Danville Independent Schools. That person needs to be that voice. Now, any questions about the standards? I know I've taken up a little bit of time. We thought this was going to be a brief meeting. And Glenn's comparing me to Steve already.
I don't have a question, but I actually have a comment that I don't know that this is the right place. But in one of the sessions I attended at the conference, they talked about when the superintendent gives their remarks, one district shared, but this is how they do it. When the superintendent gives their remarks at the beginning of each board meeting, they will, talk about the things they're doing, and then they will specifically say, and that aligns with performance indicator 7.1 or whatever. So that gives us as a board a way to kind of keep an eye on and track and be able to go back and go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. That is the thing that happened. Okay.
I agree with that. And it's actually, you have the opportunity to do that in e-meeting under KSBA that really tracks that as well. Yeah. Yeah. And another thing is as well, just seeing as we're saying that, but I think moving forward, I think it'd be pretty important at the beginning of the meeting to have some board member read our mission statement, our vision for our district, and just everybody is clear from the beginning, this is the work that we're doing, because it goes to the heart of what we're doing, exactly what you're saying.
Because I think some of these things we don't necessarily, there's a lot of things on here, these are a lot of things. So I don't know that I always think about, oh, that's 7.1, or oh, that has to do with this thing. So I feel like things have that pointed out. I hope we can do that.
Sure. Then I'll call your attention to page 14. have this as a procedure, but based on our procedure, you can add this. And I would certainly recommend some district goals. And here's how I would recommend it. Once you all have determined which one or two standards you really want to have the superintendent focus on, I would develop those goals based on those specific standards. Now, there could be broader goals, but I would just truly say, what do we really want to do on strategic leadership? What do we really want to do on instructional leadership? And then build those goals. In fact, on page 15, I've written on my packet that I recommend that you write that goal out as a board. And then, so for example, what the superintendent's performance rating is for that goal. And here, they give you an example of, I think, 3 goals, and then you can come back and at the end of the year with the summative evaluation, just basically talk about the performance in regards to those goals. All right, and then I mentioned early at the end of the so-called end of the year, again, I recommend this in March or April, you're going to do a summative evaluation. You're going to come back together and you're going to say, you know, in regards to strategic leadership, that was a focus of the superintendent this year, and our superintendent did this, accomplished, exemplary, developing. And then you're going to make some comments. That superintendent's going to provide evidence for that, and you're going to make some comments. You'll do the same for each one of those. But my point is, let's not plan on holding our superintendent. The superintendent has to be accountable, but let's not mark improvement required under influential leadership when we didn't ask them to focus on influential leadership as the 2 that we would like for them to focus on. That may be that it's continuing to develop. It may be that you just simply say, accomplished. We just check that one off. And so that's the summative evaluation. You'll approve that evaluation in an open meeting. And towards the end of the packet on page 21, they give you an evaluation, a sample of the evaluation and how that is written up and presented to the board. We have a few notes there as well. Let me pause for just 1 second, and it seems like there was one other thing that I wanted to say. Let me think about that and see in the meantime if you have any questions.
I have a question, I'm trying to find the page for that. So in the KSBA example, I'm looking at page 5. Their process for evaluation of the superintendent has 11 pretty detailed steps. And then ours does not. Is that something that we need to address in your professional opinion?
I would say that as long as the process is clear when you meet in July, you can always write it out. And this is a procedure. Procedure is the recommended way to do things. It's how we do the work. It's not the policy. And so you can recommend how we do that work, submit that. Our gentleman at KSBA, Garnet Thurman, is it? I mean, he'll write that, he'll type that up, and you can have that. It's got to go through 2 readings and so forth, but we can do that. And I do remember what I wanted to say whenever I paused, and that is, this evaluation process is a conversation, and it's a work in progress. But a document, if things are going really well with your superintendent and the board and the community, if it's going well, this thing really doesn't matter. And if things are going really bad with the superintendent and the board, you can do this, and it's really not going to matter. It does matter. I don't want to lessen it. But you know when things are going well and when they're not. If you don't have the conversations along the way, then the document, it's hard to use the document to kick somebody into gear. And what I mean by that is, typically, it's the autopsy. We're saying, oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. That's okay. It becomes a conversation to say, therefore, we need you to do this, and it becomes that conversation. All right, that's what I have. Are there questions? Other questions?
Well, I was I do want to say is, this instrument is really intensive. I mean, it's something that if I were the superintendent and I was told we're going to do every bit of this, I wouldn't be so sure I'd want the job. We have to treat it as a guide. There are going to be times and things that the superintendent does or doesn't do that doesn't meet well, but the evaluation document, all the subgroups in each one of the sections, they're not there to be a check off. They're there to say, oh, 80% of this has been done and has been done well, or whatever it might be, but it's not something that, and this is where a lot of confusion has been happening with a lot of boards, is they literally take the 11 substandards and start checking them off. And that's just not, that's not how it's meant to be. So I do agree that with a new superintendent, first year, probably ought to key on 1 or 2, maybe 3 out of the 7, but have the understanding that they're probably going to cover all the other standards anyways. So, you know, it's a lot of work on our part, and that's fine. That's why we get paid the big bucks to make all this happen. And so just those, and I wish that Esther could have been here tonight. She's out of town for a conference. Just going through the sessions doesn't always tell you what the boards have actually experienced. So, but this will be something that when the new superintendent is hired, it'll be priority. And to let you know, Jennifer, that we generally took about every 5 weeks that we actually did meet in closed session to discuss superintendent evaluation, so that it just didn't happen all at one time. It's impossible to try to do it once a year.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah. So, and I'm hoping that will continue. Dr. Thomas, thank you very much for that.
Very good.
Very informative, and it's also nice to get the perspective from a superintendent that's been through this before. So, excellent. Okay. We are now going to start talking about finance. So we're going to do the financial statements first.
Good afternoon or evening. I just wanted to call your attention to the first part, which is the bank recon or reconciliation. You can see that we had a beginning balance of $11,082,921. And then at the end of the month, it went up to $12.2 million. That number balances down with the total funds in the cash balance. So if you looked at all of those, all of our funding, at the end of it, all that cash would add up, and that's how we balanced. So, if you look at the general fund here on, it's 12.7 in cash. And then I want to point out the comparative. If you look on that first page of the bank statement, you're going to see, I'm sorry, we had some, I'm sorry, I apologize, it's not the first page of the bank statement, it's going to be over on the balance sheet. It's 12.7 in the cash and bank, so that's how that all is unilateral. And then we had the balance on the bank statement, and it is also at the ending bank balance of February 2020 that is reconciled. I also included the monthly register of everything that took place in our office, and that's on the monthly report from Eunice.
Anything stand out in those monthly?
We have, you can see we have more money in receipts. We're still taking in a small amount of revenues as far as sales, property taxes. But we're trying to balance what we're bringing in, because we know later on we won't have that revenue, so.
Can I ask what the voided checks were about?
Oh, we did a mass void in a batch. These were checks that had like age on them of 3+ years. So we had wrote those checks and we went through them and looked, and for some reason or another, the vendor or the person that was receiving the payable did not cash that check, and they were normally like small checks. So we went through and we did a mass void on that. 3 years is all that we have to keep those in our archives. So we only went back 3 years and did that. We still have outstanding checks, but they're more current. So if one happens to come through, we can always go back in and open it back up and adjust it at that point.
Okay. That's just a good thing to know on how we do that. All right.
I don't think that had been done for a while, and probably because of the transfer of leadership in that department.
Yes. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you, Kim. on
You're
that.
welcome. So, the next report is the invoice report. There were a few things I wanted just to bring attention to. Our Imagination Playground, which is under James Stallman. We spent $6,200 on that. Those are large foam blocks for the playground, and they were used from the MAP grant that we had received. We also spent $5,254 to McAfee, and they were kind enough that we bought the supplies of the mulch for the playground at Tolliver. And I think we talked last month about that being finished, or it was a work in progress at the board meeting. So that was just the supplies of mulch and anything else that went along with that. He actually donated the labor, his guys did. So that was quite a significant savings to us. And then George's Music, we purchased new instruments for the music program. Those were purchased from ESSER grant, and that was around $10,405.
Do we know when they're coming in?
No, not at this time. It goes back to the delay on products and supplies and the supply chain, so we
It's got to hang in there.
just,
Do we know what schools will be used at, or will they be used at all the schools?
they're always, I know Sunrise, I think they got some, didn't they, Sherry, and some other. So it was a good, everyone got over something. I also wanted to let you know, as we discussed on the property taxes, we are now at 98.382% of revenue collections, and that's 95.51% of the bills. So. And we also, there was a question last month about the utilities, and is that a little Joe, you're able to see that?
I don't think that was uploaded.
Okay. I'm gonna just pass it around. You can see, they've been differences on the electricity, but that rate has been fluctuating quite a bit. You know, obviously, anybody has a Facebook account, I'm sure you saw where people were getting the electric bills that were double, triple. So that bill will not be on here. We're not aware of how that's affected our district yet. The water bill, they also had some changes in the way they billed, which they went from bi-monthly to a monthly bill, so that somewhat affected our bill and basically being able to compare the bills from last year to this year. And then our gas bill is a tier rating system. So after you hit a certain amount of units of gas, the rate per unit actually goes down. So right now we're in a time frame that we're using gas. So the rate, it looks like it actually went down, but it's only because we've got that discount. I'm just gonna pass that around, and I can email that to you.
Let's do that.
It'd be great if you would.
Yeah, just.
So we need to make it official document.
We can.
So Kim, also on the water, wasn't it, they also went to the monthly bill, but then also had an increase?
Something like that, yes, they did. So it was also the way they did the tier. I think they also did the tier, and when it went to monthly, you weren't hitting that mark and being able to get that discounted rate.
Right. So do you feel like they've gotten that rectified, or do we know?
That depends on who you talk with. I mean, they technically, the rate did not increase. But if you actually divide it out from what you were paying, it did. So it depends on which side of the argument you're on, as if you're paying more. In the end effect is, yes, you do pay more for your water bill. We are paying more for our water, but we did not get a rate increase. So how do you do that?
Yeah.
Depends on the question.
Right. And I just wanted to ask, because I mean, it isn't just commercial users that are going through this too.
No.
It's also the homeowners that are seeing this too, and not getting any real answers from City Hall. And one thing you all may not know, but the city water is not under any compulsory regulation agency. It's not like other municipalities that have to answer to the Public Service Commission. City-run utilities do not. Unfortunately, we only have one, which is the water. But there's a lot of other places, it's Kentucky, you know, like in Owensboro, where it might be, where it's everywhere.
So we're fortunate for that,
So it makes it hard when you're, of course, we're a large user for 8 months, and then it just, you know, subsides quite a bit. So anyways, but I appreciate you looking into that, but we still need to probably try to get a straight answer on that.
Right, and I do think when, you know, last year, only about half the year, did we have kids and staff faculty in the building, so you're still not getting a true comparison, and hopefully next year we'll have a better comparison of what's going on with our utilities, but I think we all know the utilities is increasing.
Definitely has. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns? Glenn?
Thank you.
And if you would upload that to us.
Oh, we will.
We also need to make it part of the minutes. So we need to actually do 2 motions. So we need a motion on the finance report, financial statement.
I make a motion that we receive, approve the financial report on financial statement as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the approval of the financial statement as submitted. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. And then we also need a motion on payment of invoices.
To make a motion that we approve the payment of invoices as submitted.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second on the payment of invoices as submitted. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Thomas, I'm going to turn this over to you on C.
Okay, on C, we're talking about the softball concessions and restrooms, and I'll just remind the board that you all approved basically the shell of the project. What he was talking about, that would be basically trucked in on a trailer and set down, and you approved, it was just slightly under $200,000 to do that. We knew that we would have to come back and have architectural fees added, hookup fees, the water run to it, all of those things that we knew was coming. So once we got that finalized, we have presented the board with an updated BG1. The updated BG1 in essence is about $135,000, I believe it is, more than the initial one that we approved last month. I think last month, or a few months ago, not last month, was right at about $189,000, I believe it was. And so now the total project cost, including architectural fees, including the 5% contingency, would be $328,714.66. Seems like, just in general, when you're looking at that, that might seem like a really, really expensive concession stand and restroom. But in essence, just the cost, the things that we're dealing with cost-wise is no different than builders in our community are dealing with. And that is just this continual rising of costs. And so I think initially we probably hoped that would be, we knew the architectural fees were going to hover around $20,000, and it's a little bit higher than that just simply because of the amount. I think the architectural fees are somewhere around $25,000. And so it's a little bit higher in and of itself. But just all of those things, such as pouring concrete, running the lines, getting the connections, it probably doesn't surprise anyone that that's approaching $100,000 just to have that work done. This would all be general fund, and we do, because of initial things that we had planned for general fund, such as some of the HVAC work at the high school and at the middle school, because we've been able to move those over into ESSER funding, and that has freed up space that we're comfortable presenting to the board this amount to get this work done. And in addition, we've got a wonderful working list of facility needs that we're working through. Kim, Ernest, and I are meeting the second week of April to build you all's next list. We do anticipate that to be a considerably smaller list of facility needs because this board has been very proactive in taking care of the needs of our district. In essence, I think your maintenance of roofs, HVAC, I do think your next major project in about 3 years will be what you do with Bate Middle School in regards to renovation. So we're there, we're in a good place financially in our general fund to add on this approximately $130,000 to $135,000 in addition to what you've already approved. So it would, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Then I would recommend that we approve that, the architectural engineering, the AIA document as presented. And then on the second motion, I would recommend that we approve the updated BG1 as presented.
We need a motion on the AIA document.
I make a motion that we approve the IA document as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second for the approval of the AIA document as presented. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. And then item 6C, which is the BG 258 revised, BG 1258 revised. We need an approval, please,
Make
for a motion.
that we approve the BG 1258 revised as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second for the approval of the BG 1258 revised document as presented. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. All right, thank you all very much. Under consent agenda, have you all had a chance to look at all this? Okay, Glenn?
Yeah.
Okay, so generally, we do this with approval without discussion, so can we have that motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda with all items listed.
Okay.
Can I vote on this, considering?
Yes.
Okay, then I will second that.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda as presented without discussion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we have no one for reserved for the public, and we need to move into executive session. So we need a motion on that,
Motion
please.
that we move into executive session pursuant to KRS 61.8101C.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion for the approval to enter into executive session in accordance with the KRS 61810. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?